Welcome to Prepare for Takeoff. I'm the creator and host, Terry L. Cyrus. We're the podcast dedicated to amplifying Black excellence. Every week, we sit down with a proven professional or rising entrepreneur. This week, we're sitting down with LA's own Dr. James Norris. Dr. Norris, what's going on, fam?
Man, it's all good, man. Happy to be here, family.
Hey, man, we East Coast, West Coast, worldwide out here, man.
Yeah, that's what it is. Coast is the coast.
Absolutely. Hey, man, we doing it, man. I'm just so happy that you could join us from the West Coast doing your thing out there, man. Your story is incredible. I know you didn't start off as Dr. James Norris. That was something that you didn't anticipate even being a reality. I know you're from LA and want you to take our viewers and listeners through what that was like growing up in LA. I know when you think of LA, you think of gangs, think of all of the different things that's televised, but there's a lot of things that people may not realize that LA has to offer as it pertains to someone's child rearing experience. So what was that like for you?
It was an interesting journey. I think that growing up, I was born in Inglewood. And then from there, moms took us to South Central. We lived on 77 and Central with my older brother. I was still young, not going to school, but he was already school age. My mom saw him running into some things, and she grew up in LA, went to Dorsey High School, so she knew what it was about, right? Growing up in LA. She made a conscious decision to get both of us out of the city of Los Angeles, and we moved north to the San Fernando Valley, where it wasn't as concentrated, the gang involvement in up north like it is in LA. Everywhere you go, you're running into a particular gang hood, right? And she understood that, and growing up there and understanding the street life. And she had boys. And so it was important for her to put us in a position where we didn't get caught up, because she knew wherever you lived at, even if you weren't in the gang, you were affiliated because that's where you stayed, right? And so you didn't have to be in a gang, but if you lived over there, that's where, you were from. And she knew all that. And so she made a conscious decision to bring us to the San Fernando Valley. We landed in Lakeview Terrace. Most people know Pacoima. Lakeview Terrace is really close to that. I'm in the same vicinity. And from there, I think that was one of the biggest decisions and catalysts for us to get an opportunity to craft out a different life for Black men, right? We were young Black boys growing up, and she wanted us to be successful. And the first thing was getting us out of the city of LA and giving us an opportunity to do it. And I think from there, while it was still gang activity in the San Fernando Valley, it wasn't as concentrated, and we had an opportunity to create a life for ourselves. And with that, my mom put us in athletics, right? And so from 5 years old, I was playing all the sports. You can think of track, football, basketball, year round. And I think also that was intentional to make sure that we were doing things productive and then have a lot of idle time and those things. And looking back was very critical in really establishing the foundation of who I am today. Of course, I witnessed gang violence. When I was 11, my uncle got killed in our home through the gang violence. So I witnessed that. So I have my fair share of trauma, regardless of being removed from the center of LA. I still had those things come up on me. But with all that, my mom always preached education is the equalizer. And she poured into us that no matter what we look like, we could stand foot to foot with anybody. No one could take our education and our mind. Athletics will come and go, but she really pressed upon us that our mind, no one can determine when that's over. And so it was very important through that process of growing up, of using our athletic abilities as a way to basically change the legacy of our family. And so my older brother was the first one to go. He got a full scholarship to San Jose State University. And then I followed him 4 years later in getting my own football scholarship. And that was the catalyst for us to change the trajectory. And so from 5 years old, 6 years old, all the way up to I was 17, part of the growing up, in the LA area was staying involved in athletics, but also at the same time excelling in our education and understanding what the streets were about.
Mm-hmm.
Our mom was very intentional about giving us also the game of what it's like in the world, right? Because she knew that we would have to navigate it as Black men, and how we could do that effectively and not just have the book smarts, but understand what the streets were and how to navigate those. And so that was all a part of the rearing of growing up in the LA area, because there's a lot of folks that don't have to think about how to navigate the street life. People live in that reality that that's not something that they have to even think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that was our reality, that we had to think about excelling, staying positive, excelling in school, but understanding how to navigate when we were outside, right? And where to be, what to look out for. But again, even that may seem like, wow, you had to think about those things, but those are the things also that have allowed me to become the person that I am as well. It's helped me understand that a doctor doesn't have to be a certain way
Mm-hmm.
or come from a certain place. They can come from anywhere, and you use all your experiences that make you the type of person that can create change wherever you're at. And so my experiences makes me dope. Dr. Christopher Emden talked about having this hybridized identity. Being able to be in different spaces and navigate different spaces is a gift that not everybody has, right? And so I take pride in being able to be in an academic role as a college professor and also a licensed mental health practitioner, but also being comfortable enough to be on the ground floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time with the people, and not forgetting where I came from, and having that humility and understanding that the people within the community, they are me. That's where I was, right? And be able to extend some hope and possibility like others gifted to me. And so it's been a holistic journey. And I think that when people think of LA, they think of the gangs, and then they think of the sun. They think of the bright lights of Hollywood. But also it's just regular people out here trying to make it and build a life for themselves, right? Outside of the Hollywood stuff. And so I think that was a part of our upbringing, is trying to build a meaningful life that leaves a legacy beyond us being here physically.
When I talk to people that grew up in inner city environments, one of the safe havens were in fact sports, realizing that even though people were into the street life, whether that was gang culture or otherwise, they really saw fit to shield those people who were in athletics from a lot of that behavior, because you had an opportunity to leave the neighborhood and represent the neighborhood to the same extent. Like you said, you may not be gang affiliated, but if you're from Crenshaw, if you're in the Olympics, if you're in the NBA, if you're in the NFL, you're representing Crenshaw. So
Yeah.
you were kind of given a license to say, all right, well, not that one. He has promise. He has a calling on him, and we want to see him do his thing. Was that your experience growing up?
I think yes and no, because my mother had a deep understanding of the streets and gang culture and all that. We didn't necessarily need to be around the gang members. We knew folks, right, that were connected to it, but it wasn't a daily thing that we were around them because we were so tied up in athletics. But we did know them. And so folks didn't necessarily shield us. And I think this ties back to what our mother instilled in us, really understanding what the streets were about. And that instilling in us gave us this kind of capacity to not necessarily be enticed, but be able to stand on what was true for us, that we didn't feel like we had to be a part of that, even though we knew people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this kind of autonomy to move how we wanted to move, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but understood still what things were about, right? The
Right.
gangs and the different things. And so in that respect, we weren't connected to it that way, but we were still representing an area, right?
Right.
To your point. And so what we did how we excel did shine a light on the area that we came from. Right. And so we were representing in that capacity, and people that were involved knew that, we were athletes, that we were good. And so they never really approached us about that life anyway, to
Right.
your point, because they knew what we were doing athletically. And so that holds true. When you're growing up in the inner city, it's not just about you. Your success is not for yourself. Right. And I learned that very early on, that whatever I succeeded at, it wasn't just for me. It was for everybody that I represented and where I came from, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
people that helped me along the way. And so I was representing them, and not just me. And so, because a lot of folks cultivated me in different ways within the community.
And then also you had that unfortunate set of circumstances with your uncle, seeing what could come of this. And this hit home. This is your uncle and he lost his life. So how did that shape your early development?
Man, it impacted me in the sense that I learned how to get through, but I didn't realize until I was 23 years old, because that happened at 11. And then right after that was the big earthquake, Northridge earthquakes out here, right? And so it was this kind of sequence of things that we just kept moving, right? And then I didn't realize until I was about 23, 24 years old, when I was in my psychology program for my master's, I said, wow, I have trauma.
They're talking about me up in here.
Yeah, because from 11 to there, I just normalized it. This is what it is. This is what it's about, growing up in these areas. And then I going through my master's program in psychology and really kind of deep diving on experiences and deep diving into myself, I realized, man, I normalized everything, and I've had a lot of trauma that I need to dive into. And so that 2 years of graduate studies in clinical psychology was when I went through the process of actually looking at it and seeing what type of effect it had on me and how I was carrying that with me. And so I went definitely through a healing process there in that journey. But before then, I just normalized it, man, to to get to get through. Like, this is what it is. And then my mother, hey, let's keep our faith in Christ and keep moving forward. Right. It was no going to therapy for it or any of that stuff. And so at 23, I was able to kind of really realize what it really was, right, and what impact it had on me. And I had to work through that through my own therapy. I had a couple rounds of my own individual therapy to process the things that I saw growing up. And that was just one of them. That image has never left my mind up until this day, seeing them on the floor gone, man. So I can't escape that reality. What I see, I can't unsee. And so, but I have learned how to use those experiences and integrate them in a way that helps me personally, but also professionally with others.
And I can only imagine when you saw fit to leave LA, courtesy of a football scholarship to Western Illinois, and you go into a whole nother environment. There is a lot of things that people associate California with. Weather is one of them. And then when you
Yeah.
go into Illinois, that's a
Yeah.
place that people associate cold. So, but not only that, you're talking about geographically, you're moving halfway across the country. The average person at 17, 18 years old, they probably would have had a lot of adjustment that they had to make to not only making a decision, but actually once they landed on campus. But to your exact point, whether you realize it or not, having gone through what it is you had gone through at such an early age, I'm sure that you probably felt that there was no obstacle that you couldn't overcome. Talk us through, if there was an adjustment period, how were you able to manage from life as you know it in LA in the greater metropolitan area to Illinois?
So a couple things happened before I went to Western Illinois. I think that's important. So I graduated at 17 from high school, but scheduled to have a full ride at the University of Minnesota in the Big Ten.
Mm.
But what happened was I scored 20 points short on my SAT. So I didn't get the full ride. So I had to end up going to a junior college. And it was in that moment that really prepared me, along with my life experiences, for Illinois, because for that year and a half, my mom had moved to Lancaster, was further north of the San Fernando Valley, and I didn't have a place to stay. I just had a dream, right? And the dream was to get a football scholarship, go pro, and take care of myself and my family. So for the first year after graduation, I was sleeping in folks' house. I have a family that took me in, which they're my family today. I was able to stay with them for a full year, right? They had a cot for me, right, for a full year. And man, this was part of the growth and transformation that really equipped me for going to Illinois in the middle of nowhere. Because for that first year and a half, I really struggled, man, to really rest, to have peace. While I love the folks that I lived with for a year, I mean, I was 17, turning 18, was in at the house for all these years. Now I'm in a place where I'm trying to figure things out. Couldn't rest well at all because I wasn't home. And then after a year leaving there, I ended up staying at another family's, and I slept on the floor for about 6 months. I would get up at 3 and 4, sleep in the classrooms at the school so I can go to work out at 5 a.m. I was really grinding, right, in a sense, to pursue my dreams and aspirations, and it was very uncomfortable for that year and a half after I graduated high school. And so after that year and a half, I got the scholarship to Western Illinois, where I went into middle of nowhere, Macomb, Illinois, right? It was a culture shock, nothing but cornfields, and the school was the town, right? School was the town. And before I got there, actually, it was, they had just took it off the books to stop hanging, right?
Wow. Get out of here.
Yeah. And so I'm coming from LA, the city, metropolitan city, and I get dropped in the middle of nowhere, right? Culture shock. And it was a transition for a moment, but then I realized what I have gone through up until this point, that there wasn't anything that I couldn't get through because of what I got through to get there. And so really the goal was, let me finish off this degree, ball out, and get an opportunity to play at the NFL. And no situation was going to stop that. Right. And so that was my mentality. And that really birthed after, I mean, I guess people can say it was a failure because I was going to get a full ride to the University of Minnesota. They were in the Big Ten, right? I would have been playing Michigan, Ohio State, right? And for that to fall through, I had questioned a lot of things. And my mom did tell me, she was like, man, it's not your plan. It's not God's plan for you to go high school straight to a Division I school like your brother. And I had to accept that reality. And in retrospect, how it went down was the best, because I don't think I would have been here if I didn't go that route, because of the people I met and the journey that I had to go on, built something in me that I don't think nothing is impossible.
Thinking about starting your own business? Make it real with Shopify, the all-in-one platform trusted by millions to sell online and in person, whether it's merch, art, or digital goods. Shopify gives you the tools to build, grow, and succeed. And here's the best part. When you sign up using the affiliate link in our show notes, you're supporting Prepare for Takeoff and starting your business off right. Click the link and start your free trial today. I want to give you the opportunity to tell people what your position was, and then also what your trajectory was as far as your aspirations to play professionally after you left Western Illinois.
I was a wide receiver, punt returner, was small in stature, fast. When I did the NFL combines, I clocked 4.42. The return game, my junior year at Western Illinois, I led the whole nation statistically. I averaged over 19 yards per punt return, right? And so that was really, returning was my plan as to get myself into the National Football League. I knew my size, the traditional wide receiver, 6 foot, 5'11". They'll have occasionally 5'8", 5'9" guys in the slot. I'm 5'6". There are guys that were 5'6" that play in the slot and return like a Dante Hall. But I knew with my return skills, I could play in the National Football League. And so part of my plan was to be elite in that area, which I believe I was. And then after I got done, I got an agent, did the pro workout, had to fire one agent that I had, got a new agent when I went to Seattle, but I didn't get any calls. And so I ended up signing 2 arena football contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And I played a stint arena football, and then I called my agent and said, hey, if I can't get an NFL or CFL gig, I think I'm going to hang it up, right? And so the goal was to play professional football. And so in many respects, I did accomplish that by signing 2 professional contracts, even though they were not the NFL or CFL. They were still professional contracts, but I never labeled as that because the goal was the NFL. But what I can say is, I hadn't heard from any, unless they shared it with someone and it hadn't got back to me, but I hadn't heard anyone that watched my film as a returner say that I couldn't do it at the NFL level.
There's a lot of people, like you said, return specialists that did their thing. And then as a result of being a return specialist, then the coach begins to realize, man, I have to just find a way to get the ball in his hand in open space, and now he can do his thing.
Exactly. And so that was part of my thinking and plan. But in retrospect, I have to say everything that I had set out to do from an athletic standpoint, I accomplished. I checked all the boxes, man.
I want to give you the opportunity to explain the unlikely journey, if you will, that led you to getting your PhD.
Nah, absolutely. We did have this conversation, when I was a young kid, of someone that said, hey, you'll have a PhD and people will be calling you doctor. I would have thought you were lying. And 2, I would have said, what is that? Right. And so that wasn't even on my trajectory of becoming a PhD, an academic, a scholar. And what ended up happening for me, to your point earlier, this identity piece, like many athletes, I experienced the same thing. For the first quarter of my life, athletics was my primary identity, and really nothing else was being cultivated alongside of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know what I was going to be outside of that. And so I did go through this really grieving process of really trying to rediscover and redefine who I wanted to be in the world, and then figure out a way how to integrate what I had learned in the first quarter of my life and use it to be the person that I was becoming. And so I think this was this kind of hybrid identity that I was thinking about, as far as you can be an athlete, but then also a doctor. So a part of this integration for me was like, I don't need to abandon the first quarter of my life. I can really use that as a catalyst to be what I'm going to be next, whatever that is. And so what ended up happening, I got hired at the King County Jail as a correction officer. And then a year later, I got accepted into a clinical psychology program, specifically an existential phenomenology, a psychology program, which focused on psychology and philosophy. And so while I was there, and this is not coincidence, I ran into a professor, his class, it was called The Spiritual Dimensions of Counseling. And while I was in this class, he said, hey, there is somebody I want you to meet. And he connected me to Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. So I reached out to him, we connected, and then I sat with him and built a relationship with him. And he was actually the first Black male that I knew that had a PhD. And then the second one was Dr. Max Hunter, who was also in the Seattle area. And so really both of these brothers really made me believe that I could have that too. I was already halfway there with my master's degree, finishing up my master's degree. But they also said, man, you got the capacity to go get your PhD. And so through that process of being with them, going through my master's program in clinical psychology, along with kind of doing the internal work and integrating all of who I was and becoming something new, really inspired me to pursue my PhD, to not only be a practitioner that I am now, but now to be an educator, a scholar, an academic, and create change on a lot of different levels, right? Because I can make change as a clinician with individuals, right, within the community. But now I'm in front of a different audience as an academic, right, in the classroom, but also as a scholar. Now I can produce things in writing to share about my lived experiences, but also about what it looks like to take these athletic experiences and use those same skill sets to be successful, right, as an academic and a PhD. And so that really, relationships really shifted what I believed I could be, right? And I think sometimes we need people that represent who we are to show us that it's possible for us. And because of that, because of them and others, I feel like I have a responsibility as well to show people that you can be more than what you think.
I know you were playing ball in Western Illinois. You're originally from California, and you said you became a corrections officer in King County, which is in Seattle. So what led you to Seattle, Washington, bro?
So what led me there was my ex-wife was from the Seattle area. And once I finished in Illinois, I moved up there, right, to Seattle. And so when I was there, we were living there, building a life there. I started working with youth, and then I realized I want to make a greater impact. So I need to go back and get a higher level of education. But also I applied to work at the juvenile detention, right? And so I was doing this application while I was still pursuing pro football. And so what ended up happening, again, God works in mysterious ways. So I applied for the juvenile detention to be a juvenile detention officer. But then they actually called me for the adult jail, right? Which was the best thing, right? And so I ended up getting offered a position at the adult jail, King County Jail, which I accepted in 2000. And then a year later, I got accepted into my psychology program. But I worked in King County Jail for 11 years, right? And so this was another experience for me as well. I mean, because it was twofold in this. It was another experience of, one, being in that setting, understanding about the mass incarceration, the black male, but then being an officer, a black officer in that as well. And there's definitely confliction in that, because when I would go in every day, I would see myself, but just on the other side. But I learned a lot in there about who I wanted to be and who I was, right? Because you could still treat people, no matter their conditions, as human beings, and you can choose that. And I saw a lot of people wearing a uniform that didn't choose that. They didn't choose to keep track of folks' humanity, no matter what they were wearing. And I made a conscious decision in there that I'm going to do my job and be professional, but I'm going to keep track of people's humanity and how I treat them and how I engage with them. And that really, really also radically transformed me as well mentally. And then also what my call was and what my responsibility was as I continue to progress in my life. And I've used those tools, working in that correctional setting. Again, there I saw things that I don't wish people to see, but that was the reality of the place. But there was a whole lot of good too in there in the midst of the deep suffering, right? And so that journey was also a catalyst, right, for me too, to continue to pursue this next level of becoming a PhD and a doctor here. And so that was an interesting journey in itself. I'm hoping to put something out here soon about that journey, because I think it's important to share. And at the same time I was working there, my oldest brother got incarcerated falsely, and he's actually still in prison. We're fighting for him. But that really shifted me too, because I was like, man, how can I come in every day knowing what this system did to my older brother? Because I was in the courtroom, I went to everything and spoke to the judge about the injustice. And that really shifted me as well, is why I needed to exit. And so that was one of the things that propelled me as well, because my soul was very unsettled knowing I had to go to work every day and put this uniform on and represent something that didn't necessarily align with what I knew, right? And I don't think, I'm not against anyone that puts it on the uniform and does their job effectively. I appreciate that, and I know what they have to do for themselves and their family. I just had to make a conscious decision for myself and how I wanted to impact the world and create change. And based on my lived experience and the things that I was going through, others can do it through that profession. I believe it because I've seen it, but that shifted for me based on those experiences.
I can only imagine what that would be like with your brother being incarcerated, and then you're going to the jail and you're seeing, not only are you seeing yourself, you're seeing your brother. And I've also been told by people who are in the profession of corrections that the people behind the bars, they're not the only ones serving those sentences. So too are those COs, because you spend so much time in that setting. The only difference is you get to go home, but that can weigh on your spirit. I can imagine.
Man, it does. It does, you know, and I seen people do 30 years and a year later die. Right? I seen people come in where you see the life in them, and then they're 2, 3, 4 years in, and you don't see it anymore. Man, they're just so, and I think because of that, people lose track of folks' humanity, right? People behind the glass and the co-workers that they're working with, right? And so it's a place, if you're not intentional, that'll pull everything out of you, because it's just the nature of the place. And I was very intentional, and I'm very grateful. And I'm very grateful that I had people that I was around, that I work with consistently, that I didn't find myself getting to that place. Because it's very easy to get to the place where you can be very negative, you can be very dismissive, and you just stop really caring about people. And that's a very dangerous place. And it's not talked about enough from a societal standpoint, because everybody in a society, they're not seeing what's happening in there. But I've been in there for over a decade, and I've seen good people behind the glass. On the other side of the glass, I've seen bad people behind the glass, and I've seen bad people wearing the same uniform that I'm wearing, that don't care about people. And so it gets your soul, man, if you're not careful. And that's why I just feel I'm grateful that I was able to do my time there, but found a way to exit. And I have friends now that are still there, and they always ask me, man, how did you just leave like that and resign? And I keep telling them I had a plan. I said, you guys are coming every day with no plan. I said, I had a plan and a strategy, because I knew, based on what I saw, I didn't want my life to be 30 years and then a year later I'm gone. So I had to create a strategy. And so from a year in, folks saw me in school, getting my degree, moving forward, until I got to a place where I put in the paperwork and resigned. And so I know people are stuck, and they're stuck because it's impacted them internally, but they're also stuck about the level of money that you can make. And so folks are in there as officers making well over 6 figures.
Right.
But it's impacting them mentally and emotionally too. And when I first started, it was a sergeant who, God rest his soul, he passed away. But he told me before he passed, on the deck, he said, hey man, keep going to school like you're doing, And he said, don't buy a lot of stuff. He said, people get stuck here because they start buying stuff, boats and all this stuff, and then they're stuck here, right? Be smart so you have the freedom to exit if you need to. And I took that to heart. I have my home, but outside of that, and I exited.
I can imagine how you could get stuck in that kind of position. And one of the reasons that drove me to start this podcast is so people can get unstuck, if you will. Because once you hit a certain age and you find yourself operating in a certain station, regardless of whether or not you love what it is you're doing, you may love your lifestyle. You may love life as you know it. We're able to travel. We're able to do this. We live in this neighborhood, but you hate your job. And people don't realize how much it weighs on your spirit. You're spending far more time at the job than you are at home. And it just continues to weigh on you, weigh on you, weigh on you. And a lot of times people, they're fearful of the unknown. And I commend you for having that plan. I commend you for having that exit strategy. A lot of times people, even if they're in corporate America, they might be making a lot of money. But I say, just like that player on the football field, that player on the basketball court, at some point, your day's coming.
Yes.
At some point, you're going to get that pink slip. At some point, you're going to get that buyout, whatever it may be. What are you going to now do? You're probably not going to get that pink slip or that buyout at 70. You're probably going to get it in your 50s, and you still have a good number of years until you can start pulling out of that 401k. So now what do you want to do? That's why I always encourage people, Dr. Norris, how imperative it is to walk in their purpose on purpose and follow their passion. And no matter what it is, pursue it and be intentional with their pursuit. And you are clearly the embodiment of that. So when you made that pivot, did you pivot to working in the private capacity of a clinician, or did you pivot to becoming a professor?
Actually, I pivoted into, well, before I officially resigned, I had started my private practice. And so then when I resigned, my private practice was already going. And so I was just running my private thing, right? Seeing clients. When I resigned, I also moved back to LA in 2018. And I went strictly, and this was pre-COVID. So I was doing online counseling before COVID happened, right? And so I was doing telehealth before it happened. So when the shutdown happened, like I was already doing it, right? I was already seeing patients virtually already. And so I was just doing my private practice thing and working on my PhD. And then eventually I got hired as an adjunct at Los Angeles Valley College at the community college where I went to 20 some years ago.
Wow. Right? Full circle.
Full circle, man. Full circle. So I was actually back teaching at the place I started, right? My college life, right? And so while I was working on my PhD, I was doing my private practice and then I was teaching. And I did that all the way until I received my PhD on August 8th, 2022. And then I stayed at the community college, kept practicing, finished my PhD in April. August 1, I got offered a full tenure track, full professor position at the University of the Cumberlands, man. Since then, I've been teaching. I'm working on my 4th academic year right now. I was still doing some work at the community college. I've recently paused that, but I was still doing that simultaneously and still practicing. And then not too long ago, about 2 years ago, I got my license, my clinical license in California. And so now I'm licensed in Washington State, Arizona, and California.
So you can do telehealth in all 3 of those states.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the name of the university where you're a professor at now and again?
The University of the Cumberlands.
Okay.
It's in Kentucky, but it's an online program. I have to go there once a year for graduation. It's actually the place I got my PhD from. So my chair of my dissertation was the dean of the program. After I graduated, I was applying for professor jobs. He reached out to me. He said, "Hey, we're gonna have an opening. No promises, but I'd like you to apply." So I applied, went through the process, and they offered me the position. And so I got hired there. He saw my work because he was with me while I was going through my dissertation. So he saw how I worked, how I did things, and knew that I had the skills and necessary to be in the academic space, just how I went through my dissertation process. And they offered me the role, and I've been teaching at the university for this is my 4th academic year.
This episode of Prepare for Takeoff is brought to you in part by Riverside, the platform that I trust to record studio quality podcasts right from my laptop. With Riverside, I get crystal clear audio and 4K video. Plus, it's super easy to use. Whether you're a beginner or a pro, Riverside helps your podcast sound amazing. Try it out for yourself. Click the affiliate link in our show notes and start recording like a pro with Riverside. You have to already have something in motion while you have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time it gets to the point of, hey, James, can we see you in the office? You already have something in motion. So now with that buyout package, with that pink slip, whatever, you're like, okay, so now I could be even more intentional and pour into what it is I've already been building. And that's what it sounds like you did.
No, absolutely. I didn't know that I was doing this, but this is what I do believe intentionally that I do, is live my life in 10-year increments, right? And realizing within the decade, what are the things that I need to get done? So when I'm at the end of the decade, I'm prepared for something. And I'm in the midst of another 10-year run right now. And so what I've been thinking about is what I'm going to do. How am I going to position myself in a way, however things pan out, that I have things in motion, that I continue to do the things that I'm called to do? Because what I heard from the late Miles Monroe, Dr. Miles Monroe, he said they can fire you from a job, but they can't fire you from your work. They can't fire you from your purpose. They can't fire you from the call. They can't fire you with the talents and skills that were gifted to you, but they can fire you from a job, but no one can ever take your work. And so part of that 10-year run is how am I continuing to establish my work that I will continue to do no matter where I'm at. And that's been my mindset early on. How do I continue to build things to position myself for change? Because change is inevitable. It's coming.
Right.
And so what are you doing to ensure that you're as ready as you can be? There's always the variables that you can't prepare for, but there are things that you can prepare for. And I'm very intentional about thinking those things and living my life within 10-year increments.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing, and I tell young people this, and I believe this, and I challenge people to push back on me on this. But I tell young people and some of my students, and they look at me crazy, but I tell them success is inevitable. And they said, how is success inevitable? I said, it's inevitable because if you don't stop, eventually you're going to get there. Most people that don't succeed is not because they can't. It's because most people stop.
Right.
Or they give up. And so that's why they don't hit their destination. So if you have the willingness to go all the way through for something you want, I'll put everything on the line that you'll get it. And I'm telling you something that I know, not something I think in my head, because everything that I desire to do, I went all the way through and I got it. And that is true for this PhD.
As we close out, man, I want to give you the opportunity to leave our viewers and listeners with 3 things that you feel will help them prepare for takeoff.
For me, a couple things. As we've been in this conversation, a lot of things have gone through my head. But one thing is what I learned on my journey, because it wasn't all perfect. There was suffering. And a lot of times we have a relationship with hope, but we don't have a relationship with suffering. And what I learned is I have to build a relationship with suffering, because if I didn't, I couldn't truly be hopeful. And so me reframing challenges and suffering and having a relationship with it allowed me to build the capacity to continue to go on, because I realized my suffering was actually the pathway to what I wanted. And how could I build the capacity to sit in that to really get to the end result? Right. And so I'm encouraging people to build a relationship with your suffering if you truly want to get to whatever you desire, because suffering is inevitable. As long as we're existing, it's going to be there. Right. And so you might as well build a relationship with it on how you want to deal with it. That was critical for me. And so that's how I navigate life now, because I know suffering is coming, but I have a relationship on how I want to deal with it. Secondly, as we were talking, what I want you to leave with, I can't remember who quoted this, but I'm sure you can find it. But it's also something that I live by, and that is the pain of discipline is much better than the pain of regret.
I like that.
The pain of discipline is much better than the pain of regret, right? Discipline is temporary. The pain of it is temporary. Regret is a lifetime.
Mm.
Pride myself. Not everything has gone the way that I desired, but what I can say is that there's no regrets.
Right.
And so I encourage everybody, whatever you're pursuing, whatever you're working toward, maintain the discipline and embrace the suffering that comes with that, because I assure you, you won't live with regret, right? And that regret will live with you for the rest of your life. Motivation will come and go. Consistency keeps you going where you want to be. And then, lastly, for me, my hope is our talk together and our conversation will leave you with that anything is possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid that grew up in the LA area, single parent, saw violence, had a lot of trauma. My identity was an athlete for the first quarter of my life. I'm just a kid from LA that's a PhD and a doctor now, right? People call me doctor. I used to run on the streets till the lights came on. Regular kid growing up in the inner city, and now I'm a doctor. And so I hope that I can inspire you, right? Because the greatest human act is to inspire, right? And so hopefully I can be an inspiration, because others are inspirations to me. And you don't have to be in a box. Integrate all of who you are and where you came from. And that's what's going to make you dope.
You're doing so many different things as a professor, but I know that you also are an author and you have a book that you're working on. So tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, I had the privilege to co-edit this book with Dr. Ian Levy. He's at Rutgers. We're coming out with a book. It's a counseling theories textbook, but it integrates a hip-hop framework. If any of you are all in counseling, the traditional frameworks were set up and developed years ago, centuries ago, mostly by white men. And so what we've been doing is taking those traditional theories, even though we value them and they've contributed, and we're using a hip hop framework. So we're remixing them. And that's a textbook that, that's almost done, that we want to offer the counseling world, academic spaces, but also the community, because we believe it's a technique that can really help inner city communities and working with young people and adults when it comes to counseling. And so our textbook is really going to offer some information, some actual skills that folks can use when integrating hip hop and counseling.
Dr. Norris, you've been blessing us with so many jewels and gems as it pertains to this conversation. And I'm certain that our viewers and listeners, they're not going to want that nourishment to stop just with this conversation. They're going to want to find out more about your journey, more about how they can tap in with you now that they know they can tap in with you virtually, if they're in those 3 states in particular. And even if they're in higher ed in Kentucky, oh, that's my professor, man. You got to plug in with them. So with that being said, man, how can our viewers and listeners find you on social media, website, email, whatever you feel comfortable with sharing?
You can find me on IG at Athamba, ITHEMBA .us, at Athamba.us. You can find me on IG. Also, you can go to my website, athamba.us, or you can email me as well as athamba.us@gmail.com.
That's what's up, man. Well, we'll definitely be plugging in, and we'll encourage all of our followers and listeners and viewers to follow you on Instagram. We're very active on there. So, man, we look forward to seeing more what you have in store, man. You have the book, you have so many other things you're working on. And I'm certain that an hour alone isn't going to give us the opportunity to unpack all of it, but I feel as though we unpacked a great deal of it so they understand how and why you are the embodiment of Black excellence, as I know you to be. So once again, man, thanks for spending so much time with us. You know, it's an honor and a joy to have you on the podcast. And, you know, you sharing about your journey in a very transparent way. I know that everybody in the LA metropolitan area, moms, family members, man, they couldn't be even more proud of what it is you've been able to achieve as a doctor. And to know that someone like you, having grown up in circumstances in which you've grown up in, you know, you now have the distinction of being called Dr. Norris. That's a huge deal, especially in our community, bro. If you're a doctor, man, that is huge. So I know what that is. So salute to you, my brother, and, you know, much continued success. And I wanted to also salute and thank our viewers and listeners, whether you're watching us on Spotify or YouTube, or you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeart, or Pandora. As you know, every week, we're going to continue to bring you proven professionals, rising entrepreneurs, and all of these conversations, just like this one, will help you prepare for takeoff. Dr. Norris, thanks for joining us, my brother.
Man, appreciate you, man. So grateful, man, for you to bring me on, to call me and let us do this. I really appreciated this fellowship. Keep doing the awesome work that you're doing, brother, and bringing folks on and shining a light on the work that folks are doing that look like us, that's positive, right? Because there's a lot of negative out there. And so what you're offering to our community, but also folks outside of our community, to know that, you know, we're people too that contribute positively, right, to the society and to community. And what you're doing demonstrates that, brother.
Man, I truly appreciate that, man. Well, listen, I do it for the viewers. I do it for the listeners. I do it for the culture, because I want people to understand, man, that we are excellent no matter what it is we find ourselves doing. And it's not comprised in a particular industry. It's not comprised in spaces and places. It's not even something that's relegated to a station. A lot of times what we want to do as a people, we have a couple of things that we high point, and short of that, we want to negate it. Nah, man, we all represent, you know, some level of excellence. And if you don't necessarily know what that excellence is, you have to kind of take a deep dive in figuring out how can you discover that excellence. Because what you said earlier, man, I couldn't agree with you more. None of us wants to have a life of regret. That's the one thing that was shared with me many years ago. Man, you can have a lot of things as you grow into your later years, but one of them is that you don't want to have is regret.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. So once again, Dr. Norris, man, thanks for joining us, my brother. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Peace, brother.